The morning broke with a cruel kind of silence, the kind that presses down on a soul and makes every footstep sound louder than it ought to. Frost clung to the empty barrels along the street, and the air held that sharp, biting cold that gnawed at the bones. Eleanor Wickham pulled her shawl tighter around her shoulders, but was her youngest little Ruth. She tried most to shield. The child's tiny hands poked out, blue with cold, as her thin face rested against her mother's neck. Behind her trailed Clara, May, and Lottie, 3 pairs of eyes hollow with hunger, 3 small shadows who had not tasted bread in 2 days. Eleanor had told Clara, the eldest, "Keep walking, don't let them see us beg." But the words fell heavy, for begging was all that remained. The town square stirred as they passed. A door creaked open at the general store, and Miss Alma Reeves leaned out, her shawl bright against the dull gray of morning. Her voice carried, sharp as frost, whispering to another woman. That Whitcomb woman again should have taken Jonas Fletcher's offer when she had the chance. The words were meant to slice, and Eleanor felt them cut across her back like a lash. Still, she pressed forward, one hand clutching a small wooden box, her last secret, her last dignity. The blacksmith's shop smelled of iron and smoke. Eleanor stepped inside, her breath catching as the warmth of the forge kissed her face. She opened the box, showing the ring, simple gold, worn soft at the edges, but holding every memory of a man buried beneath a hill outside of town. She could hardly raise her eyes. "Mr. Rollins, will you buy it?" "Just enough for bread." The blacksmith's hammer stilled midair. He looked at her, pity and discomfort mingling in his face. "Ma'am," he said slowly, "a man can't take such a thing. Brings bad luck to touch what's holy between 2 souls." He shook his head, setting the hammer down. "I'm sorry." The words closed like a door. Eleanor swallowed the shame down deep, but her daughter's faces haunted her, the way Lottie tugged at her dress, whispering, "Mama, is there bread today?" The smallest one whimpered softly, too tired to cry. Eleanor left quickly, her eyes burning. On the far edge of the square, near the livery stable, a man sat sharpening a blade. He was a broad figure, quiet as the earth itself, his coat rough and lined with years of use. Silas Boone, they called him, though most spoke his name in passing like one might speak of a shadow that had lived too long among mountains. He did not often come down to town, and when he did, people kept their distance. Eleanor's steps slowed. She had no words left, only the ring in her trembling hand. She held it out to him, her voice breaking. "My daughters haven't eaten in 2 days. Can you buy this?" The scrape of steel against stone stopped. Silas lifted his eyes, gray and steady as river rock. For a long breath he only studied her, the silence stretching between them like a tight wire. Then, instead of reaching for the ring, he reached into the pack at his side and pulled out food, jerky, dried apples, a loaf wrapped in cloth. He placed it into her hands, the weight of it more staggering than gold. Eleanor stared, the tears rising hot before she could stop them. She tried to press the ring into his palm, desperate to keep her pride intact, but he closed her hand gently over it, refusing. No words, just a small nod. It undid her, and she turned away, hiding her face as her daughters tore into the bread with gasps of relief. The moment did not go unseen. Jonas Fletcher leaned against a post outside the saloon, his lips curling into a smile that carried no kindness. "Look at that," he drawled to the men near him, the mountain hermit feeding a widow like a dog under his table. The laughter that followed was low and sharp, and Eleanor's ears caught every note. Shame flooded her cheeks, but when she saw her daughters chewing, crumbs at the corners of their mouths, her heart clenched with something else too, something dangerously close to gratitude. The town whispered that day, and Eleanor felt the sting of every glance. Yet as dusk fell, and she gathered her daughters into the small corner of their cabin, she whispered a prayer over their heads. She vowed never to let them see her on her knees again, never to let them feel that gnawing emptiness, so sharp it made them whimper in their sleep. Far away, in the cabin that clung to the edge of the pines, Silas Boone sat before his fire. His hands, calloused and scarred, turned over a small locket, the only piece left of his late wife. He stared into the flames, hearing again her voice from years when she was alive. "Don't close yourself forever, Silas. A man with a heart locked away is only half a man." The fire popped, and his jaw tightened. Outside, the moon spread silver over the mountains, the same moonlight that slipped through Eleanor's window where she lay awake, her daughters breathing softly around her. 2 souls, restless under the same sky, each holding the weight of memory, and the faint, flickering question of whether life had left more for them yet. The next morning the town woke with the sound of boots on wooden porches and gossip moving quicker than the wind. Eleanor stepped outside, her daughters clinging close, and already she could feel the weight of eyes on her back. Whispers circled like crows. Miss Alma Reeves, who never let a story go unpolished, shook her head dramatically to a neighbor. First it's her ring, now it's the mountain man leaving food on her step. You'll see, she's got a plan to snare him. Mark my words. Eleanor pulled her shawl tighter, her face pale but set with a quiet pride. She had no plan but to keep her daughters breathing, yet even that seemed a crime in the eyes of the town. Silas Boone's name came often on the lips of others that day. Marshal Harlan Pike found him near the stable, his voice low but edged with warning. You meddle where it ain't wanted, Boone. That woman's had her share of offers. If you keep poking your nose in, you'll make her a burden. Silas listened, jaw tight, but he gave no answer. His silence was a wall no man could scale. Later, Jonas Fletcher crossed Eleanor's path, near the pump where her girls filled a pail of water. He leaned against the post, his hat tipped, his eyes cold. You could have had me, Eleanor, he said, his voice smooth as oil over gravel. Still could. My house has room enough, and my tables never bare. All it takes is bending. His smile widened, cruel in its certainty. Eleanor's hand trembled as she lifted the pail, her daughter's eyes wide. She met Jonas's gaze with quiet steel. I'd sooner starve than crawl, she whispered and turned away. The words cost her, yet they rang like iron in her own ears. That night, as frost gathered on the windows, Eleanor found her doorstep changed, chopped with stacked meat, a basket of food resting just inside the door. She had no need to guess the giver. She did not speak of it to her girls, but when Ruth toddled outside at dawn with a small wildflower clutched in her hand, she placed it shyly into Silas's rough palm as he passed. For the first time in many years, the man smiled. He knelt, his voice low and gravelly. Thank you, little one. Eleanor watched from the doorway, her chest heavy. The shame of yesterday softened into something else, something unfamiliar and dangerous, like warmth creeping into a frozen place. But kindness is never safe from tongues. Jonas Fletcher, stung by rejection, spread his poison through the saloon and the store alike. They're living in sin, the widow and the hermit, he told them, his voice carrying. Don't be surprised if she's carrying his bastard come spring. By the time the rumor reached Marshal Pike, it was dressed like truth. The knock on Eleanor's door came hard, late that evening. The marshal's face was lined, his hat shadowing stern eyes. Mrs. Whitcomb, he said, charity from a man like Boone doesn't come without a price. Folks are talking. You'd be wise to mind your steps. After he left, Eleanor sat in the dark, her daughters asleep on the floor beside her. She turned the wedding ring over in her hand until the gold left a deep mark in her skin. Despair whispered cruelly, maybe Jonas was right. Maybe bending was the only way left. The days pressed on, and the whispers grew. At last, in the middle of town, Jonas made his move. The church bell had just rung when he stood before a crowd gathered for the weekly meeting. His voice was smooth, his smile broad, but his words cut like a knife. This woman, he declared, pointing toward Eleanor, who stood near the back with her daughters, wanders on the edge of sin. Yet I offer her mercy. A place in my home. A place at my table. All she need do is accept. The murmurs rose, faces turning toward her. Clara clutched Eleanor's arm, May buried her face against her sleeve. Lottie began to cry. Eleanor's hand tightened around the ring until it dug into her palm. Her body trembled with shame, with fury, with fear, but when she opened her mouth, no words would come. It was Silas Boone who moved then, stepping out from the shadows of the hall. For years, he had been the silent figure, the man apart. Now his voice cut through the crowd, deep and steady. Enough. The room fell still. Silas looked at Eleanor, then at Jonas, then at every watching face. A ring don't make a family. Dignity does. And this woman has more than all of you put together. His words rolled like thunder, not loud but unyielding. You shame her for hunger when you'd sooner turn away than lift a hand. You laugh when a child eats bread for the first time in days. That ain't mercy. That's cruelty. Jonas's face burned red, his mouth opening to speak, but the weight of silence crushed him. Even the marshal shifted his stance, eyes lowered. Silas's gaze lingered on Eleanor, but he offered no claim, no demand. She don't need saving, he said at last, his voice gentler now. She only needs a chance to stand, same as any of us. The words hung in the air like a bell's toll. Eleanor felt her breath return, her shoulders straightening. For the first time since her husband's death, she stood tall before the town. She slipped the ring back onto her finger, not as a memory of what she had lost, but as a vow of who she still was. Her daughters pressed close, their small faces bright with pride. Jonas, defeated, turned away with mutters, his shadow long and bitter. The crowd parted, some ashamed, some thoughtful. And Silas Boone, true to his nature, left as quietly as he had come, his steps fading into the dusk. But before he disappeared, his eyes met hers, steady and silent, a promise spoken without words. Not rescue, not possession, only respect. That night, Eleanor sat by the fire with her girls around her, their bellies full for once, their laughter soft and unguarded. She closed her eyes and breathed deep, the weight of shame lifting like smoke up the chimney. And if you had been there, listening to the old boards creak, you might have heard the whisper that came not from her lips, but from the stillness of her heart. We are not broken. We are not less. We are enough. And so, dear listener, remember this. Hunger is not only for bread. Sometimes the soul hungers for dignity, for kindness freely given, for respect that costs nothing but changes everything. If ever you see someone bowed low by life, do not pass them by. The smallest act of grace might lift them higher than gold. And when you are the one bowed low, remember, there is still a moon above you, and it shines on both the strong and the broken, waiting to see you rise.